Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that hits close to home for a lot of property owners here in Los Angeles County.
Yeah, we're talking about your property tax assessment.
Exactly. And specifically, how you can navigate the process if you think, well, if you think that assessment might be off.
Right. We've dug into the LA County website, the California State Board of Equalization, basically trying to give you a practical guide.
Our mission really is just
Wow.
to cut through the complexity, highlight the important stuff so you feel, empowered and informed.
And let's face it, property taxes are a big chunk of change. It's totally natural to look at that assessed value and wonder, is this right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe you think market's dipped or there was a reassessment after you bought the place or did some construction and the number seems high.
Or, if your property got damaged in a disaster like a fire or flood, the reassessment might not fully capture the loss. Those are all valid reasons to question it.
Absolutely. And look, challenging the county might sound intimidating, but there are clear procedures. Think of this as your roadmap.
We're going to walk through it step by step.
Yeah, point out potential issues and just give you the knowledge you need. So let's dive in. What's the very first thing someone should do?
Okay, so you get the assessment, you look at it, and you think, this doesn't seem right. Before you even think about formal appeals, forms, anything like that.
Yeah.
Your first stop should be the Los Angeles County Assessor's office. Seriously, talk to them first.
Okay. Talk to the assessor. Why start there?
Well, they can actually walk you through how they got to that number, your property's assessed value. They're supposed to answer your questions.
So it's a chance to just get some clarity up front.
Exactly. And maybe clear up a simple misunderstanding right away.
Okay.
Plus, it's more than just talking. If you have info you think they missed, maybe a recent private appraisal or details about, say, foundation problems.
Stuff they wouldn't know just driving by.
Yeah.
Right. They are supposed to review that information, and if they did make a mistake, they can often correct it then and there.
Oh, really? So you might not even need a formal appeal.
Potentially, yes. It could save you a whole lot of trouble. It's always worth making that initial contact. For LA County folks, the Assessment Appeals Board number is 213-974-1471, according to the Treasurer and Tax Collector site. They might offer some general pointers, too.
Good tip. So, step one, talk to the assessor. Let's say you do that and you still think the value is wrong. What's next? Is that where the appeals board comes in?
Yes, that's the next level, and this is really important.
Right.
The Assessment Appeals Board is independent.
Independent? How so?
They are completely separate from the assessor's office. Their job is basically to be a neutral referee in disputes between the assessor and property owners like you.
Okay, a neutral party.
Yeah. Every county has a system for this. Sometimes it's the main board of supervisors. But in LA County, like many others, they have a dedicated assessment appeals board appointed specifically for this.
So if you take your case to this board, what can they actually do?
Well, if you bring good evidence, they have the power to change the assessed value. They can lower it.
Which is usually what people hope for.
Right. But they can also raise it, or they might just agree with the assessor and confirm the original value.
Okay, so it's not guaranteed to go down.
Definitely not. They can also remove penalties the assessor might have added incorrectly, or sometimes even reverse a whole reassessment from a sale or new construction.
So they have some real power. But are there things they can't do? Limits.
Oh, absolutely. It's key to know the limits. They can't lower your value just because your neighbor pays less or because, you're struggling to pay the bill. Financial hardship isn't grounds for lowering the value.
Right, they focus only on the property's value itself.
Exactly. They also can't waive penalties or interest if you paid your taxes late. That's separate. And they can't change the actual tax rate or grant exemptions or extend filing deadlines. Their job is strictly about the assessed value.
That's a critical distinction. Okay.
Yeah.
So who can actually file an appeal? Just the owner?
Usually, yes, the property owner. But it can also be someone with a direct financial interest, maybe someone legally required to pay the taxes even if they aren't on the deed.
Interesting.
And spouses, parents, children, or registered domestic partners can also file and represent the owner. They can sign the form, show up at the hearing.
What about hiring someone like an agent or lawyer?
You can do that too. If it's a California attorney, they can just act for you.
Yeah.
If it's another kind of agent, you typically need to give them written authorization, signed by you, and file that with the board. Those close family members usually don't need separate written authorization, though.
Okay, now the big question. If you file an appeal, do you still have to pay the tax bill while you wait?
Yes, emphatically yes. This trips people up sometimes. You absolutely must pay your property taxes on time.
even with an appeal pending.
even with an appeal pending. If you don't, you'll get hit with penalties and interest no matter how the appeal turns out.
Okay, so pay first.
Pay first. The good news is, if your appeal is successful and the value goes down, you'll get a refund for the overpayment, plus interest.
All right, that makes sense. Pay now, potentially get it back later. But what about that risk you mentioned? If I appeal hoping for a lower value, could the board actually increase it?
Yes, that is a possibility. It's important to be aware of this. Based on all the evidence presented by both sides, the appeals board has the authority to increase, decrease, or just keep the assessed value the same.
So you really need to feel confident in your evidence before you file.
Absolutely. Do your homework, know your property's likely market value, have solid proof. It's a calculated risk.
Okay, that's a really important warning. So we've covered those initial things to think about. What's step 2 in this process?
Step 2 is all about understanding the different kinds of appeals you can file, and this is super important, the deadlines for each.
Deadlines. Always critical with government stuff.
You bet. Miss a deadline and your appeal might be dead before it even starts. And the right deadline depends on why you're appealing.
Okay, let's take maybe the most common one. You think the market value of your property just went down.
Right. If you believe the fair market value on January 1st of the current year, that's called the LEN date, is lower than the county's assessed value, you file a decline in value appeal.
January 1st. Okay, and when do you file that?
In LA County, the main filing window is July 2nd to September 15th each year.
Okay, July 2nd to September 15th.
But there's a catch. That window only applies if the assessor mails out all the assessment notices by August 1st.
And if they're late, sending notices.
Then the deadline gets extended to November 30th. So it's either September 15th or November 30th.
How do you know which one it is for a given year?
Best bet is always to check with the clerk of the Assessment Appeals Board. They have to set the deadline by April 1st and publish it, usually on the county website. Don't assume, always verify the deadline for that specific year.
Good advice. And if you think the value's been down for, say, 2 years in a row, do you file once?
Nope. You have to file a separate appeal each year you believe the value is lower than the assessed value. A successful appeal only counts for that one tax year.
Okay. So it's an annual thing if the market stays down.
Exactly. After you win a decline in value appeal, the assessor is supposed to review it each year and assess it at the lower of either the current market value or your original base year value plus that small inflation factor.
Got it. So that's decline in value. What about appeals triggered by buying a property or finishing new construction?
Right, those are base year value appeals. When ownership changes or new construction is completed, the assessor sets a new base year value, and you should get a notice about it, a supplemental assessment notice.
Okay. And there are deadlines for appealing that new base value.
Yes, 2 main deadlines to watch here. The first one is pretty quick, within 60 days of the mailing date shown on that supplemental assessment notice.
60 days from mailing, not from when you receive it.
Correct, the mailing date. In some places, it might be 60 days from the tax bill mailing date. So again, if unsure, check with the clerk. But missing this first deadline matters.
Okay, what if you miss that 60-day window? Is that it?
Thankfully, no. You get a second chance. You can still appeal that new base year value during the regular assessment appeal period, July 2nd to September 15th or November 30th, in the year that new value first appears on your main property tax bill.
And how long do you have for that second chance?
You actually have that year plus the following 3 years to file, so it's a longer window.
Okay, that's much longer. But is there a catch?
There is. If you use that later filing period, you can only appeal the value as it shows up on the regular tax roll. The supplemental assessment itself, the one from the initial notice, becomes final if you didn't appeal it within those first 60 days.
Okay. So you lose the chance to challenge the supplemental part if you wait. That's tricky.
It is. And one more thing on new construction appeals. You can generally only appeal the value added by the new construction. You can't use it to reopen the assessed value of the older parts of your property from years ago.
Makes sense.
Because these base year value things can get complicated, it's really smart to call the assessor's office for clarification before filing if you have questions. Also, be aware of potential exclusions like parent-to-child transfers or construction for a disabled resident. Those need special forms filed with the assessor, usually pretty quickly after the event.
Right. Okay, so decline in value, base year value. Any other big categories? What about after a disaster?
Yes, calamity reassessment appeals. If your property was damaged by something like a fire, flood, earthquake, and the assessor reassesses it based on that damage, but you disagree with their new lower value.
You think it should be even lower because the damage was worse.
Exactly. You have 6 months from the mailing date of that reassessment notice to file an appeal.
6 months from the notice mailing date. Got it. Any others?
One last main type. Appeals for role changes or escape assessments. These are basically corrections for prior years. Maybe the assessor just found out about an addition you built 5 years ago without permits.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. They can issue an escape assessment for those past years. The deadline to appeal that is 60 days from the mailing date of the notice or the tax bill showing that escape assessment.
Okay, 60 days again. So clearly, knowing why you're appealing is key to hitting the right deadline.
Absolutely critical. Step 1, figure out your reason. Step 2, find the correct deadline for that reason.
All right. So you've identified your appeal type, you know the deadline. Now it's time for the actual paperwork, right?
Yeah.
Step 3, filling out the application.
Precisely. Step 3 is getting that assessment appeal application filled out correctly. And rule number 1 here, you must use the official form for Los Angeles County.
Not just any old form you find online.
Definitely not. Using the wrong form or an outdated one is a surefire way to get your application rejected right off the bat.
Okay, so how do you get the right LA County form?
Best way is to contact the clerk of the LA County Assessment Appeals Board directly. They'll have the current official version.
Can you get it online?
Very likely, yes. Check the Assessment Appeals Board section on the LA County website. Many counties, including LA, usually have downloadable PDF forms. Some might even let you file the whole thing online.
Okay, so you get the form. What are the really important sections people need to know?
Several key parts. Section 1 is your basic info. Applicant's information, name, address, phone, email. Pretty straightforward.
Right.
Section 2 is if someone else is representing you, an agent, attorney, or maybe one of those eligible family members we talked about. If it's an agent who isn't a lawyer or close family, you'll likely need to fill out and sign an authorization of agent part, maybe attach a separate letter.
Okay.
Section 3 is property identification. You absolutely need your assessor's parcel number, the AIN. Get that right.
Right.
Plus the property address, and check the box for property type, like single-family home, condo, etc. And there's a box asking if it's your principal residence. Check that if it is, as it can affect things later.
Got it. Then section 4, the big one. Value. How do you handle that?
This can be a bit tricky depending on the appeal type. For some specific appeals, like challenging those PACE liens, guidance suggests you might actually leave column A, value on roll, blank.
Blank.
Okay, and for column B, applicant's opinion of value, in that PACE example, the advice was to put the current assessed value from your tax bill.
Wait, you put the value you're appealing against as your opinion of value. Why?
In that specific PACE case, it's usually because the appeal isn't really about the property's market value itself, but about whether the lien should be there at all. But for a typical decline in value or base year appeal,
Yeah.
in column B, you put what you believe the property's fair market value was on the relevant valuation date. This is where your research on comparable sales comes in. You state your number.
Okay, that makes more sense for most people. Put your research value in column B. What's next? Section 5.
Section 5 is type of assessment being appealed. You just check the box that matches your reason. Decline in value, change in ownership, new construction, calamity, escape assessment, etc. For some, like supplemental or escape, you'll need the notice date and roll year from the assessor's notice.
Got it. And section 6, reason for filing appeal. Facts.
Oh, this sounds important.
Crucial. This is where you briefly state why you disagree. For decline in value, you might just check that box. For change in ownership or new construction, check the box and provide the date. Sometimes there's an other box where you might need to write a short explanation or refer to an attachment, especially for less common situations. Keep it factual and concise here.
Okay. Then there's something called written findings of fact in Section 7. What's that about?
Right. Written findings of fact are basically a detailed, formal written explanation from the appeals board about how they reached their decision on the factual issues in your case.
Do you need them? You only absolutely need them if you think you might later challenge the board's decision in superior court. They are required for a court appeal. But there's usually a significant fee to get them. One source mentioned, nearly $500, though that might change.
Wow. Okay, so it's costly.
Yeah, you pay the fee before the hearing ends. You might be able to get a fee waiver based on income. But because of the cost, you really only request them if you're serious about potentially going to court later.
Makes sense. Section 8 asks about designating the application as a claim for refund. Yes or no?
Okay, this is important for process. If you check yes, it means If you win your appeal and your value is lowered, the county should automatically process your refund. It streamlines that part.
Sounds good. Why would you check no?
The main reason relates to deadlines for suing later. If you check yes, you generally have only 6 months from the date of the appeals board decision to file in Superior Court if you disagree with their ruling.
That's quick.
It is. If you check no, you typically have to file a separate claim for refund with the Board of Supervisors after you win the appeal. Then, if that claim is denied, the clock starts for suing. Checking no can sometimes give you more time down the road if legal action is a possibility, but it adds an extra step for getting your refund.
Interesting trade-off. Okay, almost done with the form. The certification.
Yep, the end. You, the owner, or your authorized rep have to sign and date it, certifying everything is true under penalty of perjury. Use blue ink if you're filing a paper copy, typically. Follow the instructions carefully if filing online.
Okay, form filled out, signed. What's the absolute last step for submission?
Before you send anything, make a complete copy of the entire application and any attachments for your own records. Absolutely essential.
Good point. Then send the original.
Yes. Mail it or hand deliver it to the Assessment Appeals Board. The address we have is Kenneth Hahn Hall of Administration, 500 West Temple Street, Room B4, Los Angeles, CA 900012. But always wise to double-check that address on the county website just in case.
And maybe send it certified mail, if mailing.
Definitely a good idea. Get that proof of delivery.
What if you file it, then change your mind? Can you withdraw the appeal?
Generally, yes, you can withdraw before the hearing. However, if the assessor plans to argue for a higher value at the hearing, they might need to agree to your withdrawal. And the board itself can technically still decide to review the assessment even if you want to withdraw, though that's probably rare.
Okay. And one last thing on applications. If you own, say, 2 different properties, 2 separate parcels, do you need 2 applications?
Yes, almost always. 1 application per assessor's parcel number, AIN. The only tiny exception is if multiple parcels are legally treated as one single appraisal unit, which is uncommon. When in doubt, file separately for each property.
Got it. Okay, so application submitted. Phew, what happens next? We're on to preparing for the hearing now, right? Step 4.
Exactly. Step 4 is all about gearing up for the assessment appeal hearing. After the board accepts your application, you'll get a notice in the mail setting your hearing date. They have to give you at least 45 days notice.
45 days. Okay. And how long does it usually take to get a hearing?
The goal is usually within 2 years of when you filed the appeal. There are rules that might give you a temporary value adjustment if it takes longer, but there are exceptions, so check the local LA County rules.
Okay, so you get the notice. What's the single most important thing to do now?
Evidence, evidence, evidence. You need to gather everything that backs up your opinion of the property's value. And remember, the board can only consider evidence presented at the hearing.
So stuff you sent with the application doesn't count unless you present it again?
Correct. Previous chats with the assessor don't count either. It has to be formally presented during the hearing itself.
What kind of evidence works?
Lots of things. Your own testimony, explaining your reasoning, testimony from an agent, lawyer, or an expert like a certified appraiser, other witnesses maybe. Written stuff is huge. Appraisals, letters from realtors giving their opinion of value, photos showing the property's condition, repair estimates, maybe engineering reports for big issues. The board decides how reliable it thinks written evidence is.
What's not allowed?
Depositions, sworn testimony taken outside the hearing are generally not admissible. And remember, the assessor or their representative will be there too, presenting their evidence.
Right. For a typical homeowner appealing their house value, what's usually the strongest evidence?
For residential properties, hands down, the most persuasive evidence is usually comparable sales data. Comps.
Comps, meaning sales of similar homes nearby.
Exactly. But similar and nearby have specific meanings here. First, they need to be arm's length sales, basically. Normal market transactions between unrelated buyers and sellers, property offered openly, not a sale between family members, for instance.
Okay, normal sales. What else makes a good comp?
The property should be similar to yours in key ways. Age, square footage, lot size, number of beds and baths, condition, features like a pool or garage. And the timing of the sale is absolutely critical.
Timing. How so?
Okay, this is a big one. California law is very strict here. The appeals board can only consider comparable sales that happen no more than 90 days after the valuation date for your appeal.
Only 90 days after. Not before.
Sales before the valuation date are definitely relevant and admissible, the closer the better, but sales after the valuation date are only allowed if they occurred within that 90-day window. Anything sold later than 90 days after your valuation date is legally inadmissible.
Wow. Okay, that 90-day after rule is crucial. So you need to know your valuation date. Remind us what that is again.
It depends on your appeal type. For change in ownership or new construction, it's the date the event happened, as shown on the notice. For decline in value, it's always January 1st of the appeal year. For calamity disaster, it's the date the damage occurred.
Got it. Use the right date. Find comps sold near that date, especially before or up in 90 days after. Where do people find these comps?
The assessor's office itself is often a good starting point. They track sales and might make lists available, maybe for a small fee or have online tools. Real estate websites can be useful too, but you have to carefully check the dates and property details against that 90-day rule. Talking to local real estate agents who know your area well can also be very helpful.
Okay. Now, I heard about something called an exchange of information. What's that?
Right, that's an optional but often recommended process. Basically, you and the assessor can agree to formally swap all the evidence you both plan to present before the hearing.
Like showing your cards beforehand.
Kind of, yeah. If you want to request it, you have to ask the board clerk and the assessor in writing at least 30 days before the hearing. You include your opinion of value and all your supporting data, like your comps list.
And then the assessor has to respond.
Yes, they have to give you their value opinion and their evidence at least 15 days before the hearing. If they request the exchange first, you have to respond 15 days before.
What's the point? Why do it?
It lets you see exactly what the assessor's case is based on, which helps you prepare your rebuttal. It prevents surprises at the hearing.
Are there downsides?
The main thing is, once you do a formal exchange, you generally can't bring up totally new evidence at the hearing that wasn't exchanged unless it directly responds to something they shared. Trying to introduce brand new stuff can lead to the hearing being postponed.
Okay. So it forces preparation but limits surprises. Who can request it?
The assessor won't request it if the assessed value is over $100,000. But you, the property owner, can request it regardless of the value. It's often a good idea, especially if your case has some complexity. Just check the local LA County rules for the exact procedure.
Okay, makes sense. So evidence gathered, maybe information exchanged, it's hearing day. Step 5, the hearing itself. What's the vibe like? Formal courtroom.
No, generally much less formal than court. Think more like a structured meeting. You don't need a lawyer, though you can have one. But someone needs to be there for you, either you or a representative who really knows the facts of your case.
And if you send a representative...
Like we said, if it's not you or a California attorney, you'll probably need that written authorization filed beforehand. Check with the clerk.
Who actually hears the case? Is it a panel?
It could be the full assessment appeals board, which is usually 3 or 5 members. Or especially for simpler cases like single-family homes or condos under a certain value, maybe around $3 million was mentioned, it might go before a single assessment hearing officer first.
A hearing officer. Is their decision final?
Depends on local rules. Their recommendation might be final, or it might need approval from the full board. You should find out beforehand which setup applies to your case. For some specific appeals, like those PACE ones again, the advice was actually to opt out of the hearing officer process if possible and go straight to the full board.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about presenting. Who has to prove what? Who goes first?
This is the burden of proof. Usually the burden is on you, the applicant, to prove the assessor's value is wrong. So you typically present your evidence first.
Usually on me. Are there exceptions?
Yes, quite a few important ones where the burden shifts to the assessor.
Like,
if it's your owner-occupied primary home, or if the assessor set a value different from your purchase price, assuming you filed the ownership change form on time. Also for escape assessments, again, if paperwork was filed properly before, and anytime the assessor is trying to raise your value, or when penalties are involved.
okay, so in those cases, the assessor has to justify their number first.
Correct. They present first. Whoever has the burden generally gets to make an opening statement and a closing argument too.
When it's your turn, any tips for presenting effectively?
Be clear, be concise, be organized, stick to the facts and the evidence that supports your opinion of value. Don't get emotional or just complain about high taxes. Focus on the comps, the appraisal, the photos, the repair costs, whatever backs up your number. Be ready for questions.
Makes sense. And after everyone's presented, how does the board decide?
They base their decision strictly on the evidence presented by both sides during the hearing. They weigh everything they heard and saw and make a judgment on the property's value.
Can you get a recording or transcript of the hearing afterwards?
Usually, yes. Audio recordings are common. Transcripts might be available too. You'll need to contact the clerk soon after the hearing, likely within 60 days, to request it and find out about any costs.
Why would you want a recording?
It's highly recommended if you think you might appeal the board's decision further to Superior Court. You'll need it, along with those written findings of fact we talked about, for a court case. They are separate things, the recording transcript and the findings of fact, but both are often needed for court.
Okay. So the hearing's over, decision made. That brings us to step 6. After the hearing, what happens if you win and the value is lowered? Do you get a refund automatically?
Hopefully. If the value is reduced and you already paid based on the higher value, you're due a refund.
Yeah.
In many counties, maybe LA included, it might happen automatically. The tax collector or auditor just processes it.
Might?
Yeah, in some places you might still need to file a separate claim for refund of taxes form to actually get the money back. Best to ask the appeals board clerk when you first file your appeal what the procedure is in LA County for getting the refund if you win.
Okay, good to clarify that. Are there deadlines related to getting refunds?
Yes, a big one. Generally, counties can't refund taxes that were paid more than 4 years before the refund claim is filed.
4 years. What if the appeal takes a really long time?
Exactly. If your appeal process drags on and the final decision comes close to or after that 4-year mark from when you paid the tax, you need to protect your refund rights.
Ow.
2 main ways. You can file a separate protective claim for refund directly with the County Board of Supervisors before the 4 years are up, or, remember Section 8 on the application form? Checking yes to designate it as a claim for refund usually protects your right from the start.
Okay, so checking that box is important for protecting refund rights too.
Yeah.
What if you lose the appeal or you just disagree with the board's decision? What's next?
Well, the Assessment Appeals Board decision is final at their level. They don't do rehearings. So if you disagree, your next step is usually filing that formal claim for refund with the County Board of Supervisors. Unless you already checked box 8 on your appeal form, making it a claim for refund. In that case, you usually skip the separate claim to the supervisors.
Okay, so either you file a claim with the supervisors and they deny it, or you already designated your appeal as a claim. Then what?
Then your final option is to file a lawsuit in California Superior Court. You typically have 6 months from the date the Board of Supervisors denies your claim, or potentially from the Appeals Board decision date if you check box 8, to file that lawsuit.
And for court, you definitely need
Those written findings of fact and the hearing transcript or recording, essential for the court to review the case.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly thorough, a lot to take in. Can we just quickly recap the main steps for someone in LA County thinking about protesting their assessment?
Sure, let's boil it down. 1, consider talking to the assessor's office first. Maybe you can sort it out informally. 2, know your appeal type decline in value, base year, calamity, etc., and nail down the correct filing deadline for that specific type. Super critical.
Right. Deadlines.
3, use the official LA County application form, fill it out completely and accurately, make a copy, and submit it on time. 4, prepare for your hearing, gather strong evidence, especially comps within the 90-day rule, and consider the info exchange.
Okay.
5, attend the hearing or send a knowledgeable rep with authorization. Present your case clearly using facts and evidence. 6, understand what happens after, how to get a refund if you win, how to protect those refund rights, and what the steps are for further appeal through the Board of Supervisors and potentially Superior Court if necessary.
That's a great summary. It really shows that while it takes effort and paying attention to detail, understanding these steps gives you, the property owner, a real pathway to argue for a fair assessment.
Absolutely. It's about knowing the process. And here's the final thought. Don't wait until you get your tax bill and have a shock.
Yeah?
Consider doing a little proactive research before the assessments even come out. Maybe around January or February. Just casually check recent sales of similar homes in your neighborhood online.
Get a feel for the market around that January 1st land date.
Exactly. It gives you a baseline. Even if you don't end up appealing, knowing the market helps you understand your assessment when it arrives. Being proactive can give you a head start and some valuable perspective.